What is up, guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here. In today's video, we are going to look at some of the cards that I think absolutely need to be reprinted soon. Obviously, I don't work for Konami, so I don't know how exactly they decide which cards are going to be reprinted in any given product. However, what I do know is that sometimes cards can go for years without being reprinted. Now, a lot of the time this has no real effect on the secondary market. Like, when's the last time that you guys thought about a card like Vylon Delta, for instance, right? However, sometimes a card becomes a necessary component of a meta deck, or even becomes a staple, and without a reprint, the card can skyrocket in price for quite a bit. For example, Vanity's Emptiness was an old Star Strike Blast common that became a staple part of the meta for a really long time, and eventually we were looking at like $40 for a common card, right? Or alternatively, we can look at Mist Valley Apex Avion, which shot up in price when it first started seeing play in Pendulum decks, and then wasn't reprinted until just last year. So what we're going to do today is kind of look at some of those older, forgotten cards that really need to be reprinted. Now, one thing that I do want to note here is that we're not going to go over anything too recent, although I would love to see reprints of cards like Phantasme, Pot of Extravagance, and Infinite Impermanence, which I'm sure a lot of you guys would like to see as well. Those cards are a little bit too new for me to include here, as Konami is definitely aware of the prices on the secondary market for those cards, and they're very likely to be included in either the Battles of Legend or Mega Tin sets of 2020. One other thing I do want to note here is that there are fairly few opportunities for reprints to come out over the next little while. Right now it's looking like all we have are Mystic Fighters in November and Legendary Duelists in January. We actually saw some pretty relevant reprints in Fist of the Gadgets, right? Like Hidden City and Ignis Heat. So hopefully we can see similarly good ones in Mystic Fighters. However, these don't really have too many slots, so hopefully instead we can see them in something like an OTS tournament pack. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's get started. So first up, we have Brotherhood of the Firefist Dragon. We actually talked about this card a couple of times before, and it's currently sitting at around $20 to $25. This card has two versions that are available: the Super Rare from Cosmoblazer, a set which first came out way back in 2013, and then the Duelist League Rare, which isn't a version that was very highly distributed, so a lot of players don't have access to it. Now, this card is a very necessary card to play Firefist, a deck which got a whole ton of new support in Fist of the Gadgets. You get to summon any Firefist monster out of your graveyard with this card's effect, and if you have Eagle on board, the new Link monster, then you don't even have to pay cost to activate this effect. Also, this effect isn't a hard once per turn, so you can abuse it multiple times in the same turn in order to combo off. Now, I don't think that the deck is too strong. I know, like, personally, I really wanted to play it when I first saw it because I really like the art on all of the Firefist cards, but I think that the boards that the deck makes just aren't strong enough, and the deck is very vulnerable to something like Nibiru. However, I think that a Dragon reprint would be really great for a lot of casual players because the fact that it is so expensive as well as hard to find makes it like a paywall that discourages players from putting together the deck. So I think reprinting Dragon would be a great way to make a really fun deck accessible to a lot more of the player base, as well as help stores with selling the Fist of the Gadgets set. Next, let's talk about Infernoid Decadron. So Decadron is a fairly old super rare from Clash of Rebellions, and I believe it has never been reprinted before. So this is one of the most key cards in the Infernoid deck, as it's one of the few monsters that can be normal summoned, and you get to dump an Infernoid monster from your deck, typically a Nunku or Deviati, turning it into a free negate on board. Often you're summoning 1 or 2 copies of this card with Void Feast, maybe 3 if you have multiple copies, and setting up multiple negations. This deck hasn't been really successful recently, with both Reasoning and Monster Gate at 1. However, ever since the Layer of Darkness structure deck came out, the deck has seen the odd top here or there. However, this deck is really popular with a lot of casual players as a deck that's able to abuse a pretty broken mechanic in being able to tribute your opponent's monsters to negate their cards. Also, for the most part, this deck is really cheap and easy to put together. A lot of the Infernoid cards are common, and the Layer of Darkness cards are all available in the structure deck. So Decatron is really the only remaining piece that's kind of difficult to pick up. By reprinting Decatron, that's just one more deck that's both fun and easy to play, available to your average casual player. Next up, we have a couple of cards here, both from the Madolche archetype, Madolche Mageline and Madolche Chocolat à la Mode. So for whatever reason, I feel like these two cards have kind of flown under Konami's radar. The deck is a really popular fan favorite archetype, as all of the cards have really cute artwork and their names are all puns. The deck actually just recently received new support, a couple of smaller cards, but they've actually made the deck like a tiny bit more competitive and they're actually played. However, Chocolat a la Mode is currently a $30 card, an ultra rare that is only a couple of years old but has not yet been reprinted, so it has climbed up in price quite a bit. I remember way back when they were only like a few dollars. And then of course we have Madolche Magellan, which is a $20 super rare from Return of the Duelist, which hasn't been reprinted since the card first came out in 2012. That is honestly pretty ridiculous, especially for an archetype that is loved by players as much as Madolche is. Now, while this deck isn't necessarily a competitive meta deck, I feel like there are a lot of players who want to collect the cards from this archetype, and they don't necessarily want to shell out massive amounts of money for these cards when they're not necessarily going to play with them. So I do think that reprinting these Madolche cards would be a great step in helping both casual players and collectors. Alright, now let's talk about Totally Awesome. So when this card first came out, it was like a $50 to $60 card, I believe the second most expensive card in the set, just behind Dimensional Barrier. From there, it saw play in decks like Paleozoic, and then again in decks that would attempt to abuse Bahamut Shark to bring it out for free, and then more recently we've seen it in decks like Marincess and Prank Kids, as well as dumped by the effect of Mega Zaborg and Necroz. After a bit of hype recently, we saw this card hit around $20, and now you're looking for anywhere from $12 to $15 for a single copy of it. However, I feel like this card is definitely one of the cards that is most in need of a reprint. This card was only reprinted in the Megatins from its year. Because it is such a strong card that is quite well known, if it doesn't get reprinted, I think there's a very good chance that we could see this card hit as high as $30. However, with Marincess expected to get new support over the next couple of sets, this card will hopefully see a reprint within the next little while, as reprinting this card and making it more accessible will encourage players to build and try playing with whatever new Marincess cards come out. Okay, so we're going to break our recency rule here a little bit just this once, because the next card we're going to talk about is Cyber Emergency. So this card came out only about a year ago, but I want to talk about this card because I believe it is very important that it's reprinted within the next couple of months. So this is a card that's key in Cyber Dragon decks, as it allows you to search for any Cyber Dragon monster. Cyber Dragons are a deck that have become increasingly popular with the player base over the last little while. It's a very strong deck that is able to OTK your opponent out of nowhere. The deck has adopted the use of the Orchest engine in order to make really strong boards, as you can make Infinity before going into your Orchest combo to hopefully deter your opponent from using Nibiru or some other hand trap on you. And at the same time, with the Megatins coming out about a month ago, most of the Cyber Dragon cards have been reprinted and are very easily accessible to a lot of the player base. Cyber Emergency is kind of like that last card that a lot of players would need to put together the deck, and you're looking at $40 for each copy, so $120 for a set, which is more money than a lot of players are going to want to drop on 3 copies of a card. Hopefully, Cyber Emergency sees a reprint soon before all of the hype for Cyber Dragons goes away, so that we can see the deck live up to its fullest potential, both in terms of casual and competitive play. Next up, let's talk about Elemental Hero Air Neos. So with all of the kind of like crazy stuff going on in the collector's market, we see a lot of pretty ridiculous prices running around. This card is an older Elemental Hero card that hasn't been reprinted, so naturally a lot of collectors have eaten this card off the market. However, over the last year or so, we've actually seen Neospatians get a fair amount of support, most notably Neospace Connector. And because of this new support, Elemental Hero Air Neos was actually a pretty sought after card, and even the ultra rares were really hard to find. Apparently you can OTK your opponent using this card, so it's a bit of a cheesy card in like a cheesy strategy. However, because of this, we are currently looking at $60 for an ultra rare copy and over $100 for an ultimate rare copy. This card absolutely needs a reprint. I'm not saying that Neospatians are going to be like a meta deck by any stretch of the imagination, but because players who want to collect all of their hero cards or play with Neospatians in tournaments should be allowed to do so without spending this crazy amount of money. This reprint wouldn't even have a huge impact on the existing prices on the market, because a lot of people who collect elemental heroes would only want the original higher rarity prints. So yeah, even though this is a bit of like a niche strategy, I personally would really love to see this card reprinted so that I could build this deck and maybe cheese some wins at my locals. And finally guys, we have the card that I absolutely cannot believe hasn't been reprinted yet, the Blue Eyes Alternative White Dragon. So the Dark Side of Dimensions movie pack came out in 2016, so we've had 3 years of this card only being available in the one set, which is honestly kind of crazy, right? Blue Eyes White Dragon is arguably the most iconic card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Everyone knows what it is. Like, my girlfriend has never played Yu-Gi-Oh! Before, but she knows what Blue Eyes White Dragon is. So when casual players look at the game and they try to figure out what deck they want to build, a lot of them are going to turn to Blue Eyes. However, what they're greeted with instead is having to buy 3 copies of a card for around $20 a piece. So $60 for 3 copies of a card isn't a lot, but to a new player, it may seem like an awful amount of money to be spending on a single card. Fortunately, most of the rest of this deck is pretty cheap. A lot of Blue Eyes cards like Sage with Eyes of Blue and Azure Eyes Silver Dragon were reprinted in the legendary Kaiba collection. However, we absolutely didn't need to see the Dark Side of Dimensions movie pack released for the 4th year in a row, because I think most people are now fully aware that the card is included in there, but a lot of people don't want to buy the product because they know all of those cards and there are so many of them available on the market already. I mean, with the Guard Dragon package now being a thing, there are even players looking at playing Blue Eyes at the competitive level, which is really kind of crazy. But yeah, it's hard to believe that the remake of one of the most iconic cards in the game is still so annoyingly difficult to pull. If I were in charge of deciding when to reprint cards, Blue Eyes Alternative White Dragon would absolutely be at the top of my list as a card that can appeal to new, casual, and competitive players alike. Alright guys, so that is it for this video today. These are just some of my top choices for cards that I want to see reprinted. As I mentioned before, there are of course newer cards that I would love to see, but didn't cover here since it's very likely that they'll be reprinted soon anyways. And of course there are other cards that should be reprinted, but aren't really meta relevant at all, like Dried Winds or Blackwing Simoon the Poison Wind. So I didn't get to talk about those here either. Hopefully some of these cards get reprinted within the near future. Anyways guys, that is it from me today. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button for me. Also drop a comment down below in the comment section to let me know what cards you guys would like to see reprinted soon. And as always, make sure that you guys are subscribed so that you can see all of the latest content from MST.TV. Especially later this week, expect to see some ban list discussions as we are now officially in October, which means that a ban list is right around the corner. We have so much more content for you guys coming up, so I'm sure you guys don't want to miss out on that. Yeah, so until next time, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.